we have heard rumblings of this behind the scenes for a couple months, but the woman who filed this lawsuit wasn't quite ready to come on the show. We don't know if she's ready to come on the show or wants to yet, but we've known this is happening behind the scenes, and we were just sort of waiting for the hammer to fall on Chris Reykdal and for a lawsuit to be filed, which it has now. So our friend Alicia Perkins at OSD Rescue is the first one to publish this. We've been communicating with her quite a bit behind the scenes. Her headline, "Fired for Defending Female Sports, Lawsuit Accuses Reichd of Retaliation." Now, it has to do with a now fired OSPI worker named Darby Kokkonen. So she worked for OSPI and also at the same time was serving on the Tumbwater, and is still correct, serving on the Tumbwater School Board. So here from OST Rescue, State Superintendent Chris Reykdal, as well as the Office of Superintendent of Public Instruction and the state of Washington, are all named as defendants in a lawsuit filed by Darby Kokkonen on June 3rd, 2025. The lawsuit alleges that Kokkonen was the victim of retaliatory termination from her job at OSPI as Director of Student Information. Kokkonen, who is also currently serving as an elected Tumbwater School Board director, says she was fired for speaking out on transgender athletes competing in female sports during a February 27th school board meeting. So the context and history here is important, and it stems actually a lot of it from stuff that was covered on this show. So you'll probably remember Frances Stout. So we had Frances Stout on the show. She is just graduating as a junior at Tumbwater High School. She sat out, as you'll recall, her final basketball game of the year because there was a biological boy on the opposing team. And she had long ago promised herself that she would not play against a boy. So she did that. She came on this show, and then her story went crazy. She was doing national news. We had the transgender athlete on our show, who was perfectly lovely, by the way. I just happened to disagree with his decision to play against girls. So this became quite the story nationally for a few months. So in response to Frances's bravery, the Tumbwater School Board took a symbolic vote. And they basically said, it was a split vote, but the no men and women's sports side had it. And they took a symbolic vote to say, we don't support men competing against women. And one of the school board directors who voted in favor of protecting girls' sports is this Darby Kokkonen. So that happens on February 27th. Now, you'll remember on March 4th, in response to that symbolic vote, because individual school districts can't just ban boys from girls' sports, so it was symbolic. In response to that, a few days later, what did Chris Reykdal do? Well, he sent the Tumbwater School Board a threatening letter. And he basically told them, you can't do this, this is discriminatory. And he was sending these threatening letters left and right to any school districts or school boards who dared push back against radical gender ideology. So, of course, one of the people who his threatening letter was directed at was Darby Kokkonen. So what we didn't realize as all this was happening was Darby was also employed at OSPI. Her full-time job was working for Chris Reykdal as the Director of Student Information at OSPI. So a few days go by. She ends up getting terminated from her OSPI job. She told us, well, she says in the lawsuit and through Alicia Perkins, she had had no disciplinary record at OSPI, had always only received favorable reviews for her performance. She said in the lawsuit on March 6th, 2025, less than 10 days after the vote, and just 2 days after that threatening letter to the Tumbwater School Board from Chris Reykdal, Darby was placed on administrative leave by OSPI. No specific reason, policy, conduct, or performance issue was identified as a basis for the action. Substantial restrictions were placed on her activities, including removing her work equipment and network access, prohibiting her from coming onto OSPI's Capitol building grounds or contacting any OSPI employee during normal work hours. She received no contact from OSPI regarding the administrative leave until March 19th, when she was informed in a phone call with the Human Resources Department and the OSPI Chief of Staff that her employment was ending, effective immediately. Once again, she says in the lawsuit, no reason was provided regarding the termination of her employment during the call or in her termination letter. The lawsuit reads, the plaintiff believes and alleges that the decision to place her on leave and subsequently terminate her was motivated by her exercise of First Amendment rights during the public school board meeting. So that's her version of events. She says, was only ever a stellar employee, no negative reviews, no disciplinary record. You look at the timeline of it. February 27th, as a school board member, she takes the vote, symbolic to say no boys and girls sports. A few days later, Chris Reykdal sends the school board, her boss, in her official capacity at OSCPI, sends her, in her capacity as a school board member, a letter basically threatening them. 2 days after that, she's placed on administrative leave. No reason given. And to make it even worse, this is just a note from OSD Rescue's reporting. Her termination came at a time when her spouse, an Army reservist, was scheduled to deploy to the Middle East. And OSPI was fully aware of her husband's upcoming deployment and the resulting hardship her termination would cause. Now, look, if you have cause to fire someone, that's a sad story, but it's not necessarily a reason not to fire them. But to the best of her knowledge, she has not been given a reason for her termination. And given the timeline, I think it's reasonable to believe that she was terminated because Chris Reykdal and OSPI did not like the fact that she does not believe boys should compete against girls. Adding another kind of personal wrinkle to all this, did you know that that's Chris Reykdal's school district, essentially? Like, he has personal ties to the Tumbwater School District. So he has a reason to have personal animus over this school board member who's also an employee of his, speaking up to protect girls, a position that he refuses to take. So unless OSPI has some major revelation of misconduct perpetrated by this employee, I don't see any reason why this wouldn't result in a huge payday, which she would deserve. Again, it would be paid by the taxpayers of the state of Washington. But I think this shows the fear for anyone who's in a position to speak out against radical gender ideology. Chris Reykdal will send you threatening letters. He did it to multiple school districts across the state. He'll threaten to pull funding from school districts. He's already done that. And if he has any power and control over your job, he'll take it away from you. This is a major controversy. You think the mainstream news will report on it? Guess we'll have to wait and find out. But big credit to Alicia Perkins at OSD Rescue for breaking that story. We're going to follow this. I hope at some point this employee is willing to come on and talk to us. And OSPI will never talk to us about personnel matters, although we'll do our best to try to get information from them on whether they have anything that they could offer us that would justify what they did to this worker. All right, I want to also take this opportunity, since we're talking about education and Chris Reykdal. We didn't play it on the show last week because we had a short week, but we had a fantastic guest on Sundays with Subscribers, expert in education, who was talking about Chris Reykdal and his assertion in a TVW interview that this whole radical gender ideology, boys and girls sports, boys and girls spaces thing is completely manufactured.
It's about engaging parents, and it's about schools understanding and then accommodating them with private spaces and all of that. And it isn't until this administration came and made it a national issue that suddenly people think there's a crisis, and they have this false sense that kids are in the wrong locker rooms, which just does not happen.
And of course, that's ridiculous. I mean, we've given plenty of examples. We had on Sundays with Subscribers a couple weeks ago, Dr. Carrie Ingraham. She's a senior fellow at Discovery Institute. She's director of the Institute's American Center for Transforming Education. And we talked about that claim made by Reichd Doll in the TVW interview.
It is happening. There is biological males across our country on public school campuses, including in Washington State, that are using the girls' locker room. And it is an attack on the safety, the privacy of these girls. And then on the sports teams, it's an issue of fairness and, again, safety. And so his notion is, and his talking points throughout that interview is civil rights. It's a civil rights issue. DEI, it's a civil rights issue. Well, think about civil rights. We have to protect these girls from an attack of biological males. And you can see across our country, under the guise of saying that I am transgender, there has been rapes that have happened on school campuses. These girls are not safe when biological males are entering their sports, entering their locker rooms. And for him to say it's not happening, that is so far-fetched. Just the sentence before what he said is, that there's such a population of intersex. And so it's not just as simple as male and female. And so his talking points, his notion, like they are not backed by science. Intersex is like 0.0001% or less of the population. And those are not the instances where this is happening. He also tried to push off as far as the sports, that it was the athletic association. It's really not in his control, and it's been happening for 15 years. And so, there's nothing he can do, and there's no problem here. But it is truly just not factual, and it's a lack of leadership. He's a father of a daughter, and you would think that he would want to protect his own daughter. But again, it's just these radical ideologies. It's who gets him elected, and he's after nothing that has to do with taking care of children, providing a high quality education, but just radical ideologies.
Yeah, that's our conversation with Dr. Carrie Ingraham, who's a senior fellow at Discovery Institute and director of the Institute's American Center for Transforming Education. She was a fantastic Sundays with Subscribers guest a couple weeks ago. If you want to check that full interview out by becoming a subscriber. And it's an interesting point she makes about so he wants to deny that these things are happening. But then when you have a school board that takes a symbolic vote to say, okay, we don't want these things to happen, he threatens them. Okay, if they're not happening, why do you care if they take a symbolic vote? He knows that they're happening. I mean, he's gone above and beyond to try to protect the right of boys to compete against girls, boys to be in girls' locker rooms. And he has the nerve to go and do a news interview where he knows he's not going to be called out on TVW and say, oh, that's just a manufactured crisis by the Trump administration. Okay, if it's a manufactured issue, why are you so obsessed with it? Why are you so obsessed with pushing it on schools and punishing schools and employees who don't align with it? Makes no sense in the world. Chris Reykdal is a joke, absolute clown.